I've got to ask this of my next guest, Congressman Thomas Massie, who is in one of my favorite, I've never even been there, but it's like my favorite spot. He calls it the Shire. And as I always say, everything can be led back to Lord of the Rings. And Congressman Thomas Massie joins us from his Shire. And is it really look like that still? Because that looks pretty much exactly. Is that a still behind you? Are you just in front of like a photo?
I'm 3 miles from here because my internet doesn't work where that picture is from, which is my living room.
I'm like that. But it looks just as picturesque as the last time you were on with us. What gives?
But every time I wake up, it looks like this as the fog is clearing. And this is the Shire. You can see Mordor in the background. I'm not wearing Precious. I call my congressional pin the Precious.
The Precious. I love
Precious.
it. I love it. Well, it's gorgeous. And I love the background. Congressman Massie, always good to have you. I have to get your reaction to the big news yesterday. I really wasn't surprised that he selected Kamala Harris. I was surprised the Democrats thought that was the least problematic choice that they could have gone with, but wasn't surprised that it was her. What is your reaction to this, especially now that all these we have people in the streets, have been in the streets for like the past 2 months protesting against a number of things, but what they say began as bad policing, but yet they're going to support the number one bad cop in California on the ticket as VP? What gives?
She wants to lock you up and throw you away for marijuana possession. I mean, I don't know how that's going to appeal to the Bernie side of their campaign, but they have to appeal to them somehow because she wants to do away with all private health care and put everybody on Medicare.
Oh,
but
gosh.
What struck me when I was listening to that clip you just played of Joe Biden was that just a year ago, he could actually form sentences, and now he can't. I mean, the decline between that debate and now is very striking. So I think
it might be one of the reasons why they have a heavy, because I think that Kamala Harris is going to be his attack dog, so to speak, his heavy hitter that goes out there. Let me ask you this. I like Vice President Mike Pence. I think he's incredibly polite. He is very statesman. Does this political environment lend to that? Or is he going to have to change his approach because they're going to have debates and he's going to have to really he's going to have to be the surrogate for the president and against Joe Biden's VP because they're going to try to invite Trump to every single argument that Kamala Harris wants to have. That would be the worst thing for the campaign to do. How does Pence fare in this, though?
Well, no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. But if I were going to have a battle plan, it would be for Pence to be the calm statesman in this race because, you've got a radical in Kamala Harris. You've got Joe Biden, who's losing it. You've got President Trump, who's over the top a lot of times. And I think people want to come home to, in the election to the calm person in this race in these crazy times. So I think Pence will attract people if he just is who he is, which is a gentleman.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Always make your opposition look crazier than you might feel, or seem sometimes, for sure.
That's not necessarily my strategy in Congress. Some days
it was Churchill's. He liked it, so it's good. I mean, it's good enough for all of us. I have so many things I want to ask you about, including this documentary that is on HBO called The Swamp. You're featured in it. It's done by the same team that did Get Me Roger Stone, and it looks at corruption in government. And I have to say, like, some of the shots of the law, I mean, some of y'all, when you're talking to the person interviewing you for the documentary, it does seem very, I don't know. It seems very, like you're, I'm going to come and tell you about how corrupt this government is. And while you have like the Washington Monument and everything behind you. And I know there was one particular spot where Matt Gaetz was talking and they have, the Capitol behind him. It just seemed very, James Bondish in a way. Talk to me about this documentary and your involvement in it.
Well, we gave them unprecedented access. I mean, we let them in our offices. They came here to my farm, to the Shire. I let them pass the gate.
Wow.
And I was very apprehensive about this because ultimately it was edited in Hollywood. I mean, They took the video to Los Angeles and edit it. And we had no control over what came out. And obviously, if it's edited in Hollywood, it's going to have a left-leaning bent to the narrative. But when they interviewed Matt Gaetz and Ken Buck and I, they really gave us a fair shake. I don't feel like they took our words out of context. I felt like they understood the message we were trying to get out, and they helped us to amplify it, which is things are really broken in Washington, D.C. People don't understand how we have to rent our committee assignments. Literally, the Democratic Party expects Democrats to give them money for the committee seats they're on. And the better the committee you get, the more money you're supposed to haul in and give it to your party. So the NRCC does the same thing at the DCCC. That's why we're sneaking around. We are literally, you can see our colleagues in the background walking around doing this stuff.
I did not know that. That's actually a really good way to put it, that it's kind of like you're renting the seat. You're sort of like leasing it out, and dependent upon how much money you can bring in with fundraising.
That's right. It's a fundraising tocracy. It's not a meritocracy.
Everything is so much in Washington is broken. What does this documentary do differently? Because I think we all, I don't know, I've never really had, and I mean, I say this with no offense, I like you. No, but I don't really like Washington. I mean, it's, pretty architecture in that it's crazy. People there are crazy. Everybody's crazy. It's, high stress. You have what you're talking about happening in the Capitol. We know it's corrupt. We know dirty dealings are happening all the time. I mean, we watched our last election. That was kind of like a silent coup d'etat in a way, where you had operatives trying to undermine a free and fair election. So what does this do differently or bring to the table that we are not familiar with and we may not know?
Well, first of all, they humanized us.
You mean they didn't say these monster Republicans, Thomas Massie and oh wow, that's different, yeah.
So instead of making us out to be terrible, they showed we have a human side. They showed the people that vote for us. They showed our staff, us working with our staff, instead of just talking heads, And so I think they really did do a 360-degree view of who we are and what we're trying to fight for. So that's different than the typical thing you see. It's not just red versus blue either. They showed, like, for instance, we're trying to end the war in Afghanistan, try to stop another war from starting. And so Ken Buck, Matt Gaetz, and I were working across the aisle, and they show how sometimes you can work across the aisle to get things done. But that when you try to do that, it's actually your leadership that conspires. Like the Republican leadership will conspire with the Democratic leadership to keep these grassroots efforts down. So, I mean,
we saw that with Tea Party.
I had to have a few drinks when I watched it the first time. And because, first of all, it was very stressful. I didn't know what they were going to make us out to be. But also, it's a little bit depressing, but in the end, I think they have a quote for me that says, ultimately, the people are still in charge. Ultimately, the people still vote for the people that come up here and do these things. So the voters need to get smarter if they want to change Washington, D.C. That's sort of the message. There are no simple answers.
And I see so many things in play here. When you kind of step back and you look at everything from the lockdown to the effect it's had on the economy, school reopening, the pandemic, even apart from the 2020 and inter-party fights, a lot of things in play to determine the 2020 election. And one of the biggest, I think, things that we have to worry about are enthusiasm of our voters. What does that look like right now? What are you seeing? And what would you tell Republicans are facing a tough road in navigating these issues and appealing to the undecideds and independent voters with messaging that is statesman, but also you got to be tough. You got to be tough. You can be civil and you can be firm and you can be hard, because what's happening is nonsense. Voters are tired of it. But there are still some that they find comfort in the old way of things. Maybe they've always been Democrats. Maybe they've always voted Democrats, similar to like 2016. What do Republicans need to do to make this a success?
Well, first of all, President Trump is still popular within the Republican base in Kentucky. I polled it twice this spring. His favorability is 94% once, and it was 93% the other time. Even Senator McConnell has a high favorability in Kentucky because of his Supreme Court work on getting the Supreme Court nominees. So I think our base is fairly energized. I think Joe Biden is going to depress their base. I think people are looking for stability. You know, these are unstable times with the virus and the schools being closed. And now the Democrats are egging on sort of the violent protests, not peaceful protests, but violent protests. And I'm always careful to differentiate that because I think you have a right to peacefully protest, but you don't have a right to bust glass and storm and take things and hurt people. So I think independents, that's really in every election who you're after in November. The people who are on the fence, the moderate Democrats, the moderate Republicans, and the independents. And I think they will come home to a message of stability. We don't need anarchy.
One last quick question for you before we go and talking with Congressman Thomas Massie, beautiful state of Kentucky. That's his shire right there and behind him. To speak of enthusiasm with Republican voters, one thing that would make a lot of voters enthused is to see Republicans in the Senate and Republicans elsewhere hold accountable the individuals who were responsible for all of the drama after 2016, Mueller, et cetera. Why hasn't that been done, and which Republicans are holding that up?
Oh, well, a lot of those things, like when we uncovered them in the Oversight Committee, they get referred to the judicial system. And it's the courts in Washington, D.C., which are still stacked with liberal judges. So it's hard to even get them to act on anything once you put it into the judicial system. When Obama was president and it was his cabinet, Eric Holder and those folks who were just thumbing their nose at us, we wished we had a jail in the Capitol. You know, there was some talk at the State of the Union. Could we nab him with the Capitol Hill police and put him in jail? Because they were just thumbing their nose at us, and the only recourse we had was the court system, and it's the D.C. circuit. So that's where a lot of it bogs down. I want to pass legislation that has teeth in it. For instance, Dana, one piece of legislation I would love to see is not just penalties, but criminal penalties for anybody in government that spies on a legislator or a campaign without the knowledge of the legislator or the campaign. Because when they can spy on us in the legislative branch, which they do, or when they can spy on their own president, even though ostensibly they're in the executive branch, then they have a lot of power. And we need to take that power away from the political class that are in Washington, D.C., regardless of who gets elected. There's the same people. Let's put criminal penalties against the government officials. Let's make it a felony to do some of this stuff and to put some real punishments behind them. We could do that legislatively.
Yeah, there needs to be some kind of accountability for some of these folks, for sure. Congressman Thomas Massie, we're going to watch you in the swamp. We're going to watch you.
All right.
I hope everyone checks
Dana.
that out on Netflix as well. Congressman, always good to see you. God bless. We'll talk with you again soon. Appreciate you.
God bless.